What's going on, everybody? John Matrix here. Hope y'all are having yourselves a wonderful day wherever you're at, whenever you're watching this. Hopefully you don't hear it, but there are people outside mowing their yard. It's Florida. It happens all the time down here. Hopefully that noise doesn't intrude too much on the video here. But regardless, we're going to be jumping into the next episode of the Magnus Archives. We're checking out episode 9, A Father's Love. Links will be down below in the description, as always, to the Rusty Quill Podcasts YouTube channel, the Magnus Archives playlist, and to their website. So do me a favor, if you enjoy this video, be sure to go over to their channel, give it a like, check out the podcast, check out anything they got going on sponsorship wise, check out any kind of Patreon stuff they got going on, anything going on with their YouTube memberships, and check out their website if you want to give them some extra support. If you'd like to do the same for my channel, there is a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description. The YouTube membership benefits and tiers that I have to offer. So if you would like to check all that stuff out and see if it would have any interest for you, you can do so as you please. Yeah, looking forward to getting into this. Hope you enjoy it. If you do, consider leaving a like and a sub, as it helps me and the channel grow. It lets the YouTube algorithm gods know that you enjoy this kind of content and you want to see some more. But regardless, I just appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to come in and hang out and watch the video. So hope you enjoy. So again, we're going to jump in. Magnus Archives number 9, A Father's Love by the Rusty Quill Podcasts. Good. Hopefully it doesn't come through too bad.
Rusty Quill presents
These intros always hit hard.
Magnus Archives.
I don't know why, but the music kind of reminds me of The Mummy for some reason, or just gives me that kind of like Egyptian feel. I don't know why.
Episode 9, A Father's Love.
Statement of Julia Montauk regarding the actions and motives.
Montauk. Hold up. Hold up. Is this going to tie into the SCP universe here now? We got the Montauk house coming in here. Is that what's happening?
Motivations of her father, the serial killer Robert Montauk. Original statement given December 3rd, 2002. Audio recording by Jonathan Sims, head archivist of the Magnus Institute.
This is going to be the Montauk Protocol. We got the Scarlet King hopping over here into the Magnus Archives. Is the Father's Love going to be a representation of the love the Scarlet King has for his children? Is that what's happening in this one?
London.
Sorry, for those of you who don't know, Montauk is an SCP reference for a protocol that is to help keep a god sealed away, essentially. So, interesting little crossover. Anyway.
Statement begins. My father was a murderer. There's no way I can reasonably deny it at this point. The evidence provided by the police was overwhelming, and I saw his shed myself. I'm not here to try and clear his name. There wouldn't be much point anyway, as I'm sure you know he died in prison last year. 7 years isn't much to have served out of a life sentence, but I doubt it was the early parole he'd have hoped for. Sorry, maybe that wasn't in the best taste. Still, his passing is why I feel like I can tell this story. Something I never really felt free to do before now. I always expected him to talk about it during the media frenzy that surrounded his trial, but for whatever reason he kept quiet. I think I understand a bit more now why he never spoke about it, preferring people draw their own conclusions. But at the time I couldn't fathom why he just sat there silently, letting others talk for him. I'd like to tell someone now, though. and I've only recently finished my court-appointed counselling sessions, so I'd rather not tell the tabloids and have "my father killed to fuel cult magic, says daughter of monster" splashed over page 7 of the weekend edition. So that leaves you guys. Respectable is hardly the word I'd use, but it's better than nothing. So yes, my father killed at least 40 people over the course of the 5 years prior to his arrest in 1995. I won't recount the lurid details. If you're interested, you can look up Robert Montauk in the newspaper archive of any library. There'll be plenty there. The papers clearly didn't care much about the American bombing, because in April of that year they seemed to be talking about nothing but my father. There were also a couple of books on him, none of which I can really recommend, but I guess Ray Cowan's "No Bodies in the Shed" is the closest to what I'd consider accurate. Although it does imply that I was an accomplice, despite the fact that I was 12 years old at the time. Honestly, I discovered most of the details from the newspapers and the court, just like everyone else. My father spent my formative years killing dozens of people, and I had no idea.
That's crazy.
I think back over my
Can you imagine that, dude? Can you imagine, having a father who seems normal, loving, you have, a good childhood, whatever, good relationship with your father, and you find out he's a serial killer, dude? Like, I could only imagine what that kind of situation would be like, Jesus.
childhood, the more sure I am that there was something else going on. I don't have any theories as to what any of this means, but I just need to get it down on paper somewhere, and this seems as good a place as any. I've always lived in the same house on York Road in Dartford. Even now, after all that's happened, and all I know about what went on there, I can't bring myself to leave. As far as I know, the shed came with the house. It always sat in the garden, old, wooden and silent. I don't recall it being used until after the night my mother disappeared. That's when everything started to get strange. My memory of early childhood is patchy, mostly isolated images and impressions, but I remember the night she vanished like it was yesterday. I was 7 years old and had been to the cinema that evening for the first time in my life. We had been to see The Witches at what back then was the ABC down on Shaftesbury Avenue. I had seen films before, of course, on our tiny living room television, but to see a movie on the big screen was awe-inspiring. The film itself was terrifying, though, and even now I'd say it was far scarier than any child's film has a right to be. I remember I spent a lot of it close to tears, but had been so...
This is a side tangent, but I remember that as a kid too. There were so many childhood movies, things that were supposed to be made for kids that really didn't seem like they should have been made for kids. Crazy, scary, weird stuff. I don't know. Watership Down, a lot of animated stuff. If you've seen that, that's an old animated, movie. There's a lot of them, and then of course there's tons of fairy tales and things that have been based off of, and even a lot of the Disney tales that are based off of fairy tales, although a lot of Disney stuff has been toned down in comparison to what some of the real tales were. But I mean, yeah. Anyway.
So proud of the fact that I hadn't cried at all. When we got home, I lay awake for a long time. That scene where Luke is transformed into a mouse kept playing in my mind, and for some reason it left me too afraid to go to sleep.
I'm pretty sure I've seen this movie that he's talking about too.
It was then that I heard a thump from downstairs, like something heavy falling over. I didn't have a clock in my room, so had no idea what the time was, but I recall looking out of the window. The world...
That's kind of weird, right? Not having a clock in your room. I mean,
it was dark and utterly silent. The thump came again, and I decided to go downstairs and see what it was. The landing was almost pitch black, and I tried to be as quiet as possible so nobody would know I was there. The fourth stair down from the top of the staircase always creaked, and still does, in fact, but I don't think I've ever heard it creak louder than it did that night, as I crept down them so slowly. The light downstairs were all turned off except for the kitchen light, which I could see from the bottom of the stairway. I walked into the kitchen to find it empty. The back door stood open and a cool breeze blew through it that made me shiver in my pajamas.
That's not creepy.
I saw something shiny laying on the table. Reaching up, I found my mother's pendant. The design had always struck me as beautiful. It was silver, an abstract shape of a hand with a symbol on it that I believe was meant to represent a closed eye. I had never seen her take it off.
That sounds familiar. Abstract representation of a hand with a closed eye. For some reason that sounds like a familiar symbology. But I can't place what that might be from.
In my child's mind, I assumed that she had just left it on the table, an accident, and that the open door meant nothing. I went back upstairs, necklace clutched firmly in my hand to return it to her. She wasn't in bed, of course. The space next to where my father lay, fast asleep, was empty. I gently touched my sleeping father's shoulder, and he awoke slowly. I asked him where Mum was, and he started to say something when he saw the silver chain clutched in my hands. He quickly got out of bed and started to get dressed. As he pulled on a shirt, he asked me where I had found it, and I told him on the kitchen table. Following me downstairs, his gaze was immediately locked on the open door, and he paused. Instead of going outside, he walked over to the kitchen sink and turned on one of the taps.
Interesting. So it almost feels like Mom might have been a part of some kind of occult society or something like that at some point in time, and maybe had left it and Dad knew about it and they came after her. There's something with the symbology of the running water though too. I don't remember what it has to deal with. I don't know if it has something to do with ghosts or demons or vampires, but there's something about running water that something doesn't like. So him turning that on has some kind of spiritual significance, I think.
Immediately there began to flow a dark, dirty-looking liquid, and the sick, salty smell of brackish water hit my nose, though at the time I didn't understand that's what it was. The light in the kitchen blew out at that moment, and the room got very dark. My father told me everything was fine, and that I should go back to bed.
Yeah, right.
His hands shook slightly as he took the pendant from me, and I didn't believe him, but I did what I was told anyway.
Gotcha.
I don't know how long I lay there, waiting for my father to return that night, but I know it was getting light outside when I finally fell asleep. Eventually I woke up. The house was quiet and empty. I had missed the start of school by hours, but that was fine because I didn't want to leave the house.
I mean, I wouldn't
I just
either.
sat in the living room silent and still. It was almost evening again by the time my father actually returned.
So I wonder, is it a situation where for some reason, like maybe Mom was cursed or something like that, and she'd worn that pendant to like ward off something that was, coming after her, and for some reason she took it off and then she got snatched? Or yeah, if she was like a part of some kind of occult group or secret society or something like that, and they like took that off of her or whatever, and like left it there. Or she took it off and left it there as she got snatched or something. I don't know. Interesting.
His face was pale, and he barely looked at me, just walked straight to the cupboard and poured himself a glass of scotch.
Now I wonder also, right, like if that has to do some kind of tie-in with him going on his like serial killing spree, right? Is it a situation where like something or someone or a group of people took his wife hostage and they're like, hey man, you don't do what we tell you to do, you're gonna die or something, And so like that's why he went on his like spree, because he was doing it to save his wife. I don't know.
He sat next to me, drained the glass, told me that my mother was gone. I didn't understand, still don't really. But he said it with such finality that I started to cry. And I didn't stop for a very long time.
I mean, yeah, your mom's
My
gone.
father was a policeman, as I'm sure you've read, so as a child I just assumed that the police had looked for my mother and failed to find her. It wasn't until much later that I discovered they'd never even had a missing persons report filed on her. As far as I know, I never had any living grandparents, and apparently no one noticed she was gone, which was strange.
Really?
As I have vague memories of her having friends over a lot before she vanished.
Really?
Everyone assumes she was one of my father's first victims, but there was never enough evidence to add it to the official tally. It doesn't really matter. For what it's worth, I don't think he did it. I won't deny it makes sense from the outside, but I remember how devastated he was when she disappeared. He started drinking a lot. I think he did try to look after me as best he could, but most nights he just ended up passed out in his chair. That was also when he started spending a lot of time in the shed. I'd never really paid it much attention before. As far as I was concerned, the sturdy wooden structure was just the home of spiders' nests and the rusted garden tools my parents would use once a year to attack the overgrown wilderness that was our back garden. But soon after my mother's disappearance, a sturdy new padlock was placed on the door. My father spent a lot of time inside. He told me he was woodworking, and sometimes I'd hear the sound of power tools from inside, and he'd present me with some small wooden token he had made.
Interesting.
But mostly there was silence. It should probably have bothered me more than it did, the hours he spent in there, and that odd smell I sometimes noticed, like tinned meat. But I never really paid it much attention. I had my own grief to deal with. He was gone most nights as well.
Alright, so far, like, it seems like mom may have been part of some kind of society or something like that, and she disappeared. It seems like she was real and existed at some point in time, because other people knew her and she had friends over a lot, but it's weird that he didn't file any kind of missing persons report, and no one else really followed up on anything with her disappearance. And he basically just said, you know, mom's gone. And then after that, he started spending more time in the shed. Seemingly, that's when he went on some kind of serial killing spree. And you could assume that he's, you know, taking people in there and doing whatever he's doing in the shed and disposing of the bodies somehow or something, right? You know, so I guess really the question is what really happened to the mom, you know? It feels like it's a situation where she got like snatched by someone or something, and he's having to do this to keep her alive and safe or something. I don't know. But I mean, if that's the case, right, then why would he tell his child, you know, mom's gone? Because the only way you would really like, I mean, for me anyway, right? Like, if there's a situation where, you know, my wife was taken and I was forced to have to, you know, kill a series of people in order to get her back, I wouldn't then tell my son that my wife is, you know, gone. I would make up some kind of story that something happened, it was emergency, she had to leave, do something, whatever. She'll be back sometime, but she has to be away for a while. You know, at least there could be some hope of like her returning if I do these things these people tell me to do. But that doesn't seem to be the case. So wonder if it's just, is it a situation where like maybe dad was always bad or something like that, and her coming into his life with that pendant kept the demons at bay and let everyone have a normal life, and then when something happened to her and she didn't have that pendant around anymore, all that changed. I don't know. Anyway, let's continue.
Tinned meat. But I never really paid it much attention. I had my own grief to deal with. He was gone most nights as well. Often I would wake up from one of my nightmares to find the house silent and empty. I would look for him, and he would be gone. I never despaired at this for some reason, not like I had when my mother vanished. I knew he would return eventually, when he was finished with what I had decided must be police business. Sometimes I'd lie awake until he returned. Once, as I lay awake, I heard him come into my room. I pretended to be asleep. I don't know why, but I thought I'd be in trouble if he found out I was awake. He walked over to me and gently stroked my face. His hands smelled strange. Back then I didn't know the scent of blood, and mixed with that faint saline smell of brackish water. He whispered to me then, when he thought I was asleep, promised to protect me, to make sure that it wouldn't get me too. There was a strangled sound to his words, and I think he might have been crying.
Interesting. That's an interesting twist. So yeah, what if Dad is hunting down? What if Dad's like Constantine, right? And he's actually going out vigilante style and hunting down whatever these creatures are, or whatever that might have taken his wife. He's killing them, or at least that's what he thinks he's doing, you know?
As he left, I opened my eyes just enough to see him. He stood by the door, his face in his hands, wearing light grey overalls that were stained with a thick, black substance. I often wish I'd asked him about that night. I wonder if he'd known I was awake, if I had asked him in that moment of weakness. Well, it's far too late for that now. Over the next couple of years, I noticed that my father seemed to be injured quite a lot, and there was rarely a time when he didn't have some sort of plaster, bandage, or bruise visible. I'd also occasionally find small blood spots or smears on the floors or tables, especially in the hall. I got very good at cleaning them. It never occurred.
That's also interesting, right? He's into woodworking, so is he creating like wooden weapons to fight vampires or something, you know? Or other kinds of, you know, creatures like that? Again, is he actually John Constantine? Is that what this is?
To me to pay much attention to where they came from. I just assumed the blood was my father's. He started staying home during the day and told me he'd been permanently assigned to the night shift. I believed him, of course, and it was only after his arrest that I discovered that had been the point he'd resigned his job on the police force. I don't know where the money came from after that, but we always seemed to have enough. Knowing what I know now, it sounds awful to say, but those were some of the happiest years of my childhood. I'd lost my mother, but my father doted on me, and together it seemed like we would get past our pain. I know I've made him sound like an alcoholic recluse who lived in the shed, but those were generally nocturnal activities for him. During the day was time he spent with me. There was only one time I recall him going into the shed during the day. This was a couple of years after my mother's disappearance, and I must have been about 10. The phone in the kitchen started ringing, and my father was upstairs. I had recently received permission from my father to answer the phone, so I was excited to take up my new responsibility. I picked up the handset and said my memorized phone script into the receiver. "Hello, Montauk residence." A man's voice asked to speak with my father. It was a breathy voice, like that of an old man, and at the time I decided he had a German accent, though when I was young, a lot of different nationalities and accents were lumped together in my mind under the label German.
Is that a reference to, I think, the second episode? The guy that, you know, tricked that dude into taking the coffin? I'm bad at names, so it's hard for me to kind of remember exactly what the guy's name was, but I feel like that was something that was referenced in that episode as well. That the guy he was talking to had kind of this breathy voice, or it may have been a different episode, but I feel like that's something that's been brought up in the past in another episode.
"What is this regarding?" I asked, as I had a whole phone conversation memorized and wanted to use as much of it as possible. The man sounded surprised at this, and said hesitantly that he was from my father's work. I asked him if he was from the police, and after a pause he said yes. He asked me to tell my father that it was Detective Rayner on the line with a new case for him. At this point my father had come down to the kitchen to see who was calling. I told him, and he visibly paled. He took the handset from me and placed it to his ear, not speaking but listening very intently. After a moment he told me to go up to my room, as this was a grown-up conversation. I turned to leave, but as I was heading up the stairs, the light bulb in the landing blew. The bulbs in our house broke off, and my father said we had faulty wiring. So even at that age, I was quite adept at changing them. So I turned around and headed back downstairs to fetch a new bulb. As I approached the cabinet where we kept them, I heard my father's voice from the kitchen. He was still on the phone, and he sounded angry. I heard him say, "No, not already. Do it yourself." Then he went very quiet and listened.
I mean, it's kind of sounding like my theory from earlier might be potentially a thing where wife's been kidnapped and they're telling him to go and do these things, kill people.
Before finally he said okay, that he'd do it as soon as possible. He put down the phone.
I mean, that would also make sense in a way. I don't know, right? Like, why would they pay him? I mean, I guess there would need to be some kind of income coming in, right, in order for him and his kid to live. Maybe it's a situation where they took the wife, right? She could have been involved in something. They took the wife and killed her, and they're threatening to take the kid if he doesn't do what they tell him to do. And so, like, is he John Wick? Like, we're going from John Constantine to John Wick here. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is a situation where he was John Wick in his past life, used to be a policeman, wife gets killed, the kid's threatened now, and so he's like, I'll do this to keep my kids safe. And so they're like paying him to you know, do these jobs, and that's where the money's coming from, because he said money came from somewhere and they, you know, were doing okay. So, like, yeah, did he turn into a hitman? I don't know.
Then went over to the cupboard and poured himself a drink. He spent the rest of the day in the shed. The one question they kept asking me over and over during the investigation into my father was whether I knew where the rest of the bodies were. I told them the truth, that I had no idea. They claimed they wanted to confirm the identities of the victims, which they couldn't easily do with what was left. I didn't know where the bodies were.
Yeah.
But I also didn't tell them of the other way they might have identified.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting mystery. It's intriguing to know, you know, what's going on, what happened to the mom. You know, is there some kind of more occult stuff going on here, or is this, I mean, I feel like there's going to be some kind of occult twist to this. There's going to be some kind of mystery twist to this eventually, because right now it sounds like, you know, it's sounding like someone or a group of people potentially took mom, you know, maybe again, he's a policeman, right? Maybe he got involved in, maybe he's a corrupt cop, right? Maybe he had some dealings with some kind of mafia or some other kind of, you know, corrupt organization, you know, at some point in time. And he, you know, did some things for them, got married, had a family, decided to stop doing that. They kept pressuring him to come back, literally John Wick. They took the wife, you know, and killed his wife as an example, and said, hey, if you don't start doing what we tell you to do, we're going to take the kid. So he goes back and does, you know, things for them, eventually quits the police force so he can focus more on doing what they want to do. And they start paying him more to take care of the family and the kid and blah, blah, blah. Like, is it just that? But it seems like that's kind of a little too straightforward story. I'm waiting for the twist, right? I mean, the twist, I feel like there's got to be something more with the pendant. There's got to be some kind of occult supernatural tie-in with whatever pendant she had. I feel like there's something else that's going to happen.
The victims couldn't easily do with what was left. I didn't know where the bodies were, but I also didn't tell them of the other way they might have identified the victims. My father's photographs. I didn't say anything because I had no idea where he kept them, and I thought it would only make things worse if they couldn't find them. But yes, my father took photographs. During those 5 years, I had gradually started to notice more and more canisters of photographic film left around the house. This puzzled me, since though my dad and I did sometimes go on short holidays, we never took a lot of pictures. Asking him about it, my father told me he had been trying to learn photography, but didn't trust developers not to ruin his films, as he'd apparently had problems before.
Interesting.
I suggested he make
pictures of his targets
for developing them himself. I'd seen one in Ghostbusters 2 on TV the previous Christmas and loved the idea of having a room like that. His face lit up, and he said he'd convert the guest bedroom. He then warned me that once it was done, I could never go in there without his supervision, as there would be lots of dangerous chemicals. I didn't care. I was just so glad that an idea of mine had made my father so happy. That summer, my father converted the guest bedroom into a dark room for developing photographs. Like the shed, it was locked almost all the time, but occasionally my father would take me inside, and together we'd develop photographs of cars or trees or whatever else a 10 or 11-year-old with a camera takes pictures of. Mostly, though, my father worked in there alone and kept the door locked while he did. He seemed almost happy those last couple of years. I didn't have an unsupervised look inside until a few weeks before my father was caught. It was a Saturday evening, in late autumn, and my father was out of the house. I spent the day watching TV and reading, but as it started to get dark, I found myself bored and alone. Passing by the door to what was now the dark room, I noticed that the key was still in the lock. I sometimes think back to that day and wonder if my father left it deliberately. He'd been so careful for so many years, and then he just forgot. I knew about the dangers, but something inside me couldn't resist going in. There were no photos stored there. To this day, I don't know where my father kept his developed pictures. But there were about a dozen images hung out to dry. They're still vivid in my mind, black and white and washed in the deep red of the dark room. Each photo was of a person's face, close up and expressionless. Their eyes were dull and glassy. I had never seen corpses before, so I didn't really understand.
So, it sounds like he's taking pictures confirming the people he's killed for whoever's telling him to kill it. That's what this sounds like. Again, it sounds like he's, acting like John Wick for someone.
What I was looking at. On each face were thick black lines that formed these symbols that I didn't recognize. But they were clearly drawn on the faces themselves, not just on the photos.
So this might be where the occult tie-in is. Maybe he's having to do this for some people, and these markings are for them to steal their soul or essence or life force or something when he kills them. He has to do it in some kind of ritual way.
Photographs. I don't remember the symbols in any great detail, I'm afraid. Just the faces that they were drawn onto, though they weren't people I recognized. Nor did they match any of the photos the police showed me later. I never went back in the dark room after I closed and locked the door behind me that day. I spent the next weeks wondering if I should tell my father what I had seen.
I wouldn't
know what I had seen, not really.
Right. If I found that, I don't know what I would think or what to really do, right? Yeah. Clearly, your father is into some kind of activity that is highly unexpected and not good, right? Who knows? Your mind could rationalize things, right? Maybe because you still think he's a policeman, right? So maybe he's taking, um, photos of victims and he's developing them. And this is some kind of police work. You know what I mean? So that's probably where my mind would go. And so I'd be like, oh, he doesn't, I would get in trouble if I went in there and saw, his work. I could, potentially damage some evidence or something like that. And I could get in trouble for it. So I wouldn't say anything. That's where my mind would go. But yeah, I don't know.
But it felt like a bad secret. I didn't know what to do. Finally, I decided to tell him. He was drinking on the sofa at the time, and he turned off the television as soon as I mentioned going into the dark room. He didn't say a word as I told him what I'd seen, just looked at me with an expression on his face I'd never seen before. When I was finished, he stood up and walked towards me. Before taking me in his arms and giving me the last and longest hug I would ever get from him, he asked me not to hate him, and told me it would soon be over, then turned to go. I had no idea what he was talking about, but when I asked, he just said that I needed to stay in my room until he got back. Then he left. I did what I was told. I went up to my room and lay in bed trying to sleep. The air was heavy somehow. In the end, I spent the night staring out of the window at the street below. I was waiting for something, though I didn't know what. I remember it was 2:47 in the morning that it started. I finally had an alarm clock, and the image of it is still clear in my memory. I was thirsty. I went downstairs to get a glass of water. I turned on the tap, but what flowed out was a thick stream of muddy brown, brackish water. It smelled terrible.
So I wonder, like, is that supposed to also be some kind of demonic reference or something like that too? Like, they've mentioned that several times, that every time the tap water, or at least at specifically certain points when they're running the tap water, there's like a brackish, nasty kind of water coming out of there instead of like normal, clean drinking water. So again, is that supposed to be some kind of reference to some kind of like demonology thing or ghost or some kind of poltergeist thing that I'm unaware of? Because I mean, that seems to be kind of what it's indicating, right? That there's some kind of, maybe that's like his body's getting possessed by, he's being possessed by some kind of creature or demon. Maybe he's letting himself be a vessel for something. And every time that happens, that's when the water turns. I don't know.
I froze as I remembered the last time that had happened. My father still wasn't home, and I went into the living room to watch desperately out of the window. Looking down the street for his return, I was terrified. As I stared down the road, I was struck by how small the puddles of light were from the street lamps, stretching far into the distance. But not as far as they should have gone. There were fewer lights than there should be, I was sure of it. Then I saw the light at the end of the road blink off. There was no moon out that night, and all the houses were quiet. When the street lights stopped, there was nothing but black. The next closest street light failed, then the next.
Bulbs keep going out.
A slow, rolling blanket of darkness making its unhurried way towards me. The few lights still on in the houses along the road also disappeared as the tide approached. I just sat there, unable to look away. Finally, it reached our house, and all at once the lights were gone, and the darkness was inside. I heard a knock on the front door, firm, unhurried, and insistent. Silence. I did not move. The knocking came again, harder this time, and I heard the door rattle on its hinges. As it got louder, it began to sound less and less like a person knocking, and more like wet meat being slammed against the sturdy wood of the front door. I turned and ran towards the phone. Picking it up, I heard a dial tone and would have cried with relief if I wasn't crying with fear. I dialed the police, and as soon as they picked up, I started to babble about what was happening. The lady on the other end was patient with me and kept on gently insisting I give her the address, until finally I was composed enough. Almost as soon as I had told her where I was, I heard the door begin to splinter. I dropped the phone and ran towards the back of the house.
I'm getting like the Shining vibes here, you know, the door getting busted open.
As I did so, I heard the front door burst behind me and I heard a growl. It was rumbling, deep and breathy like a wild animal, but had a strange tone to it that I've never been able to place. No matter where I turned, it sounded like it came out of the darkness right behind me. I didn't have time to think about it as I ran into the back garden and into a light that I did not expect. There in front of me was the shed. It glowed, a dull, pulsing blue from every crack and seam. I didn't stop, though, as I heard again that growl behind me, and I ran towards it and pulled at the door. The shed was not locked that night, and to this day I don't know if I regret that fact. The first thing I saw when I opened that door was my father, bathed in the pale blue light. I couldn't see any source for the glow, but it was so bright. He was knelt in the center of an ornate chalk pattern, scrawled on the rough wood of the floor. In front of him lay a man I didn't know, but he was clearly dead. His chest had been cut open, and still gaped and bled feebly. In one hand my father held a wicked-looking knife, and in the other he held the man's heart. My father was chanting, and as the song rose and fell, the heart in his hand beat to its rhythm, and the blue light brightened and dimmed in time. I looked at the walls, and noticed that they were covered in shelves, each of which contained glass jars, full of what I would later learn was formaldehyde, containing a single heart, which also beat in time with the one that dripped in my father's hand.
Okay.
It was an odd thing to notice at the time, but I remember that the dead man wore the same pendant as my mother, a silver hand with a closed-eye design. I don't know how long I stood there staring. It might have been hours, or it might have been only a moment or two. But then I heard that growl behind me and sensed a presence so close that I could feel the darkness on my back. Before I could react or move or scream, my father's chant came to a crescendo, and he plunged the dagger into the beating heart. All at once the presence vanished, and the blue glow died. I could no longer hear the beating of the hearts. In the silence, I realized I could hear police sirens in the distance. I heard my dad tell me he was sorry, and then he started to run. You know the rest. Manhunt, trial, prison, death. They say there were 40 hearts kept in that shed, not including his last victim. But of course the police didn't arrive until all that was left of it was a grisly trophy cabinet. Whatever I had seen my father doing in there, its effects had long since vanished. I don't know why my father did what he did, and I doubt I ever will. But the more I go over these events in my head, the more sure I am that he had his reasons.
Clearly.
Statement ends.
Damn.
There's not much more to be added here. The police reports on Robert Montauk are predictably thorough, and there are few details to be added. The vast majority of research into this case has already been done by the serial killer enthusiast community, which, though deeply unsettling, does often prove to be surprisingly useful in high publicity cases like this. In addition to the body of one Christopher Lorne, 40 preserved hearts were recovered from Robert Montauk's shed. They were arranged on the walls on individual shelves, forming patterns of 11 hearts on each inner wall and 7 on the wall with the door. Photos of the patterns match up to the various formula of sacred geometry, but don't appear to correspond exactly with any specific school. Of possible significance also is the fact that the rest of the bodies were never found. The symbol on the two pendants is that of the People's Church of the Divine Host, a small cult that grew around the defrocked Pentecostal minister Maxwell Rayner in London during the late 80s and early 90s. I knew I recognized the name from statement 11069222.
I was going to say, that name sounds
Currently, it
familiar.
just looks like a coincidence. Christopher Lawn was a member of the church, and his family hadn't heard from him in the 6 years prior to his murder. Mr. Rayner himself disappeared from public view sometime in 1994, and the group fragmented shortly afterwards. The police made many attempts to follow up on this lead in the Montauk case, but were never able to locate any members willing to make statements. The house on York Road is still inhabited, though the current owners pulled down the shed over a decade ago and replaced it with a patio. Robert Montauk died in Wakefield Prison on November the 1st, 2002. He was stabbed 47 times and bled out before anyone found him. After reading this statement, 3 points of interest occur. No culprit or weapon was ever found connected to the killing. He was apparently alone in his cell at the time, which was supposed to be locked. And at the time of his death, the light bulb in his cell was found to have blown out, leaving him in darkness. Recording ends.
Interesting. Good episode. Good episode.
The Magnus Archives is a podcast distributed by rustyquill.com and licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike International License. Today's episode was written and performed by Jonathan Sims. It was produced by Alexander J. Newell and Murray Porter, and directed by Alexander J. Newell. To comment on episodes, make donations, and view links, images, videos, and show notes, visit rustyquill.com. Rate and review us on iTunes, visit us on Facebook, tweet us on Twitter @TheRustyQuill, or email us at mail@rustyquill.com. Thanks for listening.
All right, well, there you go. That was Magnus Archives, episode 9, A Father's Love. Links will be down below in the description, as always, to the Magnus Archives playlist, the Rusty Quill Podcasts YouTube channel, and to their website. So if you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, be sure to go over there, give this video a like, hit that sub button on their channel, check out their Patreon, check out their YouTube membership stuff they got going on, check out their website. If you want to take your support for their channel to the next level. So, I mean, it sounds like so there was apparently some kind of what they called some kind of religious cult, right? And everyone in that cult wore a pendant. It sounds like some kind of entity wanted to kill them for some reason, potentially, right? This is what I'm gathering. But the pendant protected them. But somehow, mom's pendant got removed, broken, taken off, whatever, and she was taken by this creature that was destroying the bulbs and making the water all weird, and so I think that creature basically said to Dad, go after these people, perform this ritual, kill them, because maybe it can't get to them while they're wearing those pendants for some reason, because it wards it off protection wise. So go after them, kill them, do this ritual to, give me their essence or whatever. And, I'll keep the kid, it'll keep me from going after the kid, kind of a thing. That's what I feel like's happening. I mean, it sounded like, I gave my thoughts as we went through it, right? It sounded like at first, maybe he was hunting down some kind of creatures or whatever that, went after his wife for revenge, and they just, look like humans. And so, like, he was actually really a good guy in disguise, but killing people. So, they thought he was a serial killer, but actually he was just, killing some kind of weird creatures or whatever, or whatever the case might be. Or a creature that maybe jumps through bodies or something like that. You know what I mean? But then it also kind of sounded like he might have been a John Wick kind of scenario where he was forced to do, these killings for some kind of person or whatever. And like I said, I was just waiting for kind of that like supernatural occult twist, which we got at the end, where, he opens the shed, sees his father having drawn some kind of, symbology on the ground. There's a body in there that he's performing some kind of ritual. He's doing some kind of chant. All of the hearts are beating in unison while he's doing this. There's some kind of, entity that is coming after him. I assume it's going after the kid, not the father, I think is what's happening. And he finishes the ritual just in time before the kid gets snatched. And, after that, the beast was sated or whatever, at least for the time being. But I mean, it sounds like eventually in prison, whatever entity he warded off eventually came and killed him. So, killed the dad. So, I mean, like, it seems like the dad may have been the target all along. I don't know. Because, like, the main character giving the statement obviously still around because he gave the statement. And the dad died mysteriously in prison, being stabbed 47 times, which I think that was the same number of hearts, right, that he took from people, if I'm not mistaken. I thought the number was like 40 something, so maybe it was 47 hearts, 47 victims. So that could have some kind of significance. So I don't know. I guess that's kind of the big question that I would have, and let me know down in the comments if anyone knows, is like, is it a situation where the entity was after the dad for some reason, and the dad was doing this to ward it off? Or did the entity like threaten him? Because like that I guess is where I'm drawing a blank as to why the father was forced to do this, right? Like, and I guess the question would also be, right, that it didn't seem like from the story the father, he didn't sound like he killed his wife. It sounded like his wife was killed by the entity or something else. Like maybe she took off her pendant for some reason, left it on the table, and in that moment, that entity came and snatched her and ate her, whatever, But it seems like the dad knew about this from the beginning for some reason. So yeah, I don't know. I guess just like that's kind of what I'm hung up on, I guess, is what is the connection between whatever that entity was, the dad and the mom. And it seems like that entity was who was on the phone and was telling him to go after those people. It seems like there was some kind of religious cult that this entity wanted to kill, all of the members of for some reason. Maybe they pissed it off, maybe they summoned it, maybe they worshipped it and then broke apart at some point in time. And because of that, and who knows? But then it wanted to kill them, and mom took off the pendant at some point in time. It got her, and then the entity said, "Hey, Dad, go around and get to these people with this pendant that I can't get to because while they're wearing it, it wards off, my ability to get to them. Otherwise, I'm going to take your kid next." And so that's what he did. That to me sounds like the overall story. But I mean, I guess let me know down in the comments if there's any other details that I might have missed or whatever. But that was a good story. I really like that one. Yeah. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that comes to mind as we wrap this up, but I can't think of anything. So I mean, yeah, great story. Each episode keeps getting better. I've really been enjoying going through the Magnus Archives so far, and I'm looking forward to continuing on and seeing what the next episodes bring. So again, this is Magnus Archives episode 9, Father's Love. Links down below, like I said in the description, to the Rusty Quill Podcasts YouTube channel, their website, and to the playlist. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video of mine with my commentary and reaction. If you did, consider leaving a like and a sub, as it helps me and the channel grow. I greatly appreciate you guys watching. If you are still here watching the video here at the very end, it means a lot for you to watch the video all the way through. I greatly appreciate you taking the time to do so. If you'd like to take your support from my channel to the next level, there is a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube membership benefits and tiers that I have to offer. You can take a look at those if you would like to, if that has any interest. But again, thank you guys very much. Hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day. We'll see you guys in the next one.